Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we're in 2 Timothy 2, verses 15 through 26, which looks at being an approved worker. It's just Paul encouraging Timothy to make sure he's an approved worker for the Lord. So starting with verse 15 of 2 Timothy, he says, "Work hard so you can present yourself to God and receive his approval. Be a good worker, one who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly explains the word of truth. Avoid foolish talks avoid worthless, foolish talk that only leads to more godless behavior. This kind of talk spreads like cancer, as is in the case of Harmonius and Philetus. They have left the path of truth, claiming that the resurrection of the dead has already occurred. In this way, they have turned some people away from the faith. But God's truth stands firm like a foundation stone, and with this inscription, the Lord knows those who are his, and all who belong to the Lord must turn away from evil. In a wealthy home, some utensils are made of gold and silver, and some are made of wood and clay. The expensive utensils are used for special occasions, and the cheap ones are for everyday use. If you keep yourself pure, you will be like special utensils for honorable use. Your life will be clean, and you will be ready for the master to use for every good work. Run away or run from anything that stimulates youthful lust. Instead, pursue righteous living, faithfulness, love, and peace. Enjoy the companionship of those who call on the Lord with pure hearts. Again, I say, do not get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. A servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but must be kind to everyone, be able to teach, and be patient with difficult people. Gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Perhaps God will change those people's hearts, and they will learn the truth. Then they will come to their senses and escape from the devil's trap, for they have been held captive by him to do whatever he wants." And so Paul starts out, right, as encouraging Timothy to be someone who correctly explains, right, or guides people along the straight path, and really, teaches them the word of truth. And so this is Paul encouraging Timothy that he should keep his purpose in teaching, keep to his purpose and teaching the word, and not turn aside by engaging in false teachers' controversies. He's basically saying, like, don't get sidetracked into these just worthless conversations, right? He calls them a cancer. Literally, the interpretation is like gangrene, like something that is rotting. And so he's like, look, don't get caught up in this stuff. Don't get caught up. You don't get distracted from what you're supposed to be doing and teaching and pushing toward the message of Jesus. And this could be would be common. It's common today, and I feel like the church a lot of times gets caught up in this because we want to focus so many times on things that really don't matter, or just have these side conversations or side arguments about stuff that in the end doesn't matter, and we'll focus on those more than we will the message of Christ. And so that's Paul's encouragement there. And then he talks about Harmonius and I believe you pronounce that Philetus, and they were causing harm. They were wreaking havoc in the church by claiming that the resurrection of the dead had already occurred. Well, this was a false teaching. And so they may have been twisting some of Paul's own teaching here about the resurrection of the dead. And they may have been teaching that they already participated in heavenly life, and perhaps the physical resurrection wouldn't occur. And then there's a lot of other theories that may have gone along with this. One would be that one's conduct in the mortal bodies could not have an impact on the eternal spirits, so they could do kind of whatever they wanted. There's a lot of different things. Maybe they got caught up in taboos. They may have got caught up in the idea sometimes that there's the idea of they shouldn't have any marriage. There's the idea that they shouldn't have any pleasures on this earth, that kind of stuff. So they're really not sure what they were teaching about, with why they would thought the resurrection of the dead had already occurred. But whatever it was, whatever they were teaching there had caused them to fall away, and had caused others to fall away from the truth. And so they were no longer following God. And so Paul lets them know, he said, hey, we've lost these guys. They're lost. And so whatever it was, Paul describes their teachings as worthless, foolish talk. And so, and then Paul goes on to assure Timothy that these type of false teachings will not win, and he reinforces this call to purity and to being like, and so he uses the imagery of a utensil in a wealthy household, a utensil that's, you have your utensils that are made of gold and silver, and then you have the ones that are just back in that day made of wood or clay, right? They're kind of worthless. They're good for everyday use. And Paul's like, hey, we want you to be like these gold and silver spoons who, you know, who are valuable to God and in his household. And so that's his encouragement to uses that kind of as an analogy and imagery, um, to do that. And so we should, in one's household, right, we should endeavor to be like a utensil that is cherished rather than one that is treated with contempt. And so that was kind of the encouragement that Paul's, and I think we can all relate to that. I think we all have our homes, and or in our homes we have, the stuff that we save that we have for everyday use. Some of it maybe, for us it's plasticware and paper plates. um, but then you have the stuff that you bring out when you have guests over, right? The fancier, more expensive stuff. A lot of times when you have guests over, we don't. But but no, I mean, but I think you see the analogy here. And then he goes back and he reinforces here at the end of this not getting caught up in foolish arguments. And I want to hit on this for a little bit more again, because we have to make sure that we know that there are some things in the hard core biblical truth that we do need to focus on and we need to teach. And I think that's what Paul is encouraging Timothy here to do. So, hey, man, focus on the gospel, focus on the message of Christ, and teach that, right? Work on getting people to stay on that straight path, and focus on the word of truth. Don't get sidetracked with these side conversations, these side teachings of just stuff that's just not worth focusing on. And like I mentioned in the beginning, I think sometimes we do that in the church. Like sometimes I'll see a lot of teachings or a lot of things focusing on what the church down the road is doing, or growing up, a lot of our Bible classes and stuff could be, well, this is what this church believes, and this is what this, and this is why they're wrong. Instead of just preaching what the Bible says, we would focus on what everyone else was doing and why they were wrong. And I think we need to get away from that, right? Focus on ourselves, focus on what the Bible teaches, and don't worry. I mean, honestly, yeah, don't worry about the people down the street and what they're doing. Now, if they're trying to harm people or something, then maybe get involved. But it's like it's not our job to go around and correct everyone, right? It's not our job to go around and try to be involved in it, especially when most of what we would focus on had nothing to do with salvation, right? It was typically worship styles or some beliefs around, some small things that in the end were not going to matter, right? God's not going to give us a personal quiz on some of our theology at the end. We see that our salvation, that our stuff's going to be based upon our heart and the condition of our heart and how we accepted him and what we did with that, right? It's not going to be based on what type of worship we had, what type of, different things that we did, right? If we believe this or didn't believe that, it's not going to be based on those kind of things. And so that's the wonderful thing about it. And so I think we need to make sure that we do that as Christians, is keep our focus on Christ and on his message and bringing people to Christ. I think that's a lot of reason why we see the church in the downswing that it has been in. Now, it does seem that we're starting to see a resurgence in people looking for Christ and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that have happened because of to cause that. But if we don't keep on message about who Christ is and bringing people to Christ, and we start getting sidetracked in these other conversations, we're going to lose that, right? And so it's important that we continue to focus on Christ and teaching his message and pushing who he was. And so, as always, I encourage everyone to continue to follow along with this. I appreciate everyone who does. And I hope this has been helpful and you learn from these. And as always, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. That way you can continue to follow along with us. And as always, I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch it, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.